Chair of the Special Education Advisory Committee for the Toronto District School Board. I'm calling to order our first meeting of 2025. Happy New Year to everyone. We're speaking to you live from 5050 Yonge Street. And as well, we have people attending online. What I'd like to do first is to just go around the room and people identify who they are. And then I'll have Leanne read out who's with us online for the benefit of people watching who don't know who we are. So Tracy?
So I'm Tracy O'Regan. I'm the representative from Community Living Toronto.
And Vice Chair of
And
SEAC.
Vice Chair of SEAC.
Let's go around on that side, starting on my right.
I'm not hearing anything.
Oh. Hold on. That was just Steve Lynette. Did you
This
not
is
hear
Steve Lynette. Steve Lynette, I represent Epilepsy Toronto.
Okay, next is.
Good evening, Nandy Palmer, Executive Superintendent for Special Education and Inclusion.
Katia Palumbo, Centrally Assigned Principal, Special Education and Inclusion.
Elizabeth Schaefer, Centrally Assigned Principal, Special Education and Inclusion.
Good evening, F.A. Stathopoulos, Centrally Assigned Principal, Special Education and Inclusion.
Leo, representing Autism Ontario.
Leanne Dixon, the Special Ed Advisory Committee Liaison.
Anyone else? Yes. Okay, Leanne, could you just review who we've got with us online, please?
Sure, I'm just going down the list and I'm going to identify staff as staff and then guests. So Christine Harvey-Kerr, who is staff, Sarah Armson, I believe of staff, Michelle Arts, trustee, member of the committee, Kirsten Doyle, community member of the committee, trustee Hastings, who is a guest, Richard Carter, who is attending as a member, Deanna Cape, who is staff, Jillian Perrick, who is a speaker tonight and a guest, Beth Dangerfield, who is an association member, Julia from Learning Disabilities Association, who is a member, George Tam, who is a guest speaker, Tanya Hazelton, who is staff, Allison Board, staff, Narissa Hutchinson, who is a member, association member, Eileen Chan, association member alternate, David Cameron, who is a speaker tonight, Bronwyn Alsop, who is a association member, Liban Hassan, who is a trustee member, and John Paul Nagana, who is a community member for SEAC. And I think that's everybody except Louise, who needs no introduction.
And we have two members have joined us at the table here. Can we maybe just have you introduce yourself? Sorry, you need to speak in the microphone. We didn't hear you.
I'm Alana Bell with the Association for Bright Children.
Okay.
Jessica Miklos, alternate for the Association for Bright Children.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much. Welcome, everybody. We'll start the year with our Vice Chair, Tracy, leading us in the land acknowledgement.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay.
Juggling a lot of things here.
Okay. Please stand if you're able. Thanks. We acknowledge we reside on the lands of the Mississaugas of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Wendat. We also recognize the enduring presence of all First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples, as well as the importance of establishing and maintaining cultural safety through learning from Indigenous peoples and perspectives. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Conflicts of interest. Does anyone have a conflict of interest to declare? If so, let us know now. Tracy, anybody?
I'm in the room.
None in the room? Any online? Nobody raising their hands? None online. Okay, great. Approval of the agenda. I'm going to begin the agenda with a very 1 minute chair's report, and then I'm proposing the agenda proceed as listed. Can we have a motion to approve the agenda? Steve Lynette, seconder. Leo. All in favor? Opposed, if any?
None.
All right, agenda approved. Welcome to 2025. We've got a busy year ahead. I've circulated a chair's report, as I do for each meeting that I can. Just 4 really quick updates. We've had a discussion about writing a letter to the Minister of Education, both about our town hall and about the need for more funding for special education. I'm hoping to have something ready for February, because I've been approached by the vice chair of the Special Education Advisory Committee for Ottawa Catholic, and they came up with the idea of trying to come up with a letter that we could get as many SEACs to sign on to as a joint letter. And we're working on that now. So to the extent we can get other SEACs on board, that would be a constructive exercise. So stay tuned. With respect to, I had other good things to tell you, and they're not in my notes. So I think I may just pop up later with them for you. I am going to ask if we could treat my chair's report as received by the committee. That's not voting to approve its contents or vouch for its contents, but as committees and city councils and others do, they receive a report which makes it sort of formally part of the committee record. So I'm going to ask if the report can be received. Any objections? None? Okay. With respect to the other thing I was going to update on is that we passed a motion last September or October, memory slips, on which on the topic asking the board to come up with a more effective, swift, and user-friendly avenue for parents to pursue if they feel their child's special education related needs are not being met. That is now coming up before the Program and School Services Committee on Wednesday, and I will be here providing a delegation in support of it on behalf of our committee. More on that afterwards, and it will stream live, and I'm hoping will be archived. With that, let us turn to our first agenda item. This is an exciting item, and we have 2 speakers, both attending virtually, and we've allocated a good chunk of time because this is a very important topic. As you'll all recall from past meetings, the Toronto District School Board is planning on doing a major review of its special education program. 2 people who are going to be leading it are with us to speak tonight, Jillian Perrick and David Cameron. Jillian, I know from past dealings, and I can vouch for her as an incredible talent. And that's not to imply anything otherwise about her partner in this project. It's just, I know Jillian and I can say that, looking forward to working with her again. And so they're going to make their presentation, and then we will be, it'll be open to us to make comments or ask questions and provide feedback. Before they begin, however, I just wanted to raise, a couple of people have raised concerns with me about it. We were given a very helpful 8-page summary, and I'm going to ask both of you, when you present, you don't need to repeat what's in there. We read it. But I wanted to raise a couple of things so that if it happens that you could address these in your opening remarks, that would be great, because I know it's a shared concern. And if not, we can deal with it when it's question and answer. The first thing that I wanted to raise is a major concern that while the board has a commitment to inclusion, this proposed study, as I read it, and I may have misunderstood, looks like it's focusing only on certain categories of students and is in effect excluding certain others, on a commitment that I gather you'll use some other strategy with them, but it's not spelled out here, such as students with developmental disabilities. And I'm concerned that we need to not be excluding anyone from the study. The second thing is, one of the things that we've learned in a very, very emotionally wrenching town hall that we held last November, when we invited parents of students with special education needs to come and speak to us, is in a number of cases, they were saying, my child's needs aren't being met. Their disability or special education needs aren't being met from their own experience. Looking at a study such as this, I believe it would be important to drill, focus, and directly look at what needs students have and whether those needs are actually being met. Outcomes can be informative, but you need to know whether the people who you're studying are having those needs met or not. The third thing is the report or the project proposal lists a number of important principles you'll be guided by. One that is glaringly absent is the kindergarten to grade 12 Standards Development Committee report, which is this province's most comprehensive provincially sponsored review of education for students with disabilities in our lifetimes. That should be added into the mix, not glaringly absent, not just listing it, but substantively incorporating it. And finally, and on a procedural point, we will be asked to have 2 members of SEAC sit on some kind of oversight or advisory committee. I think we may want to consider recommending that it be more than 2. And moreover, there is an arbitrary determination in here that one must be from an association, one must not be from an association. And I think we are better placed to determine who we want to send. And if both are from an association or neither are from an association, that should not be a barrier. I hope it wouldn't be, because none of this is legislated. I just float those for you to think about. I'd like to turn it over to our presenters, and please take it away.
Thanks, David. Before the presenters start, I'm just going to speak to introduce them, and thank you both Dr. Parrick and Dr. Cameron for being here. We're really excited about doing our work of reviewing our programs and services in a cyclical way, based on the new multi-year strategic plan that we need to prioritize the goals in that plan. And so all program areas and departments, it's a natural part of our work that we will be engaging in this type of review. So I'll pass it over to Associate Director Louise Briscoe to add some comments, and then Doctors Parek and Cameron will start. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Andy, and good evening, everyone. Happy New Year. It's wonderful to have you back, and we are really very, very excited to be talking for the first time in depth in regards to the special education review. Staff are delighted to be partnering with Dr. Perrick, and it's my personal pleasure to be working alongside her. I've been hearing a lot about Jillian throughout my career, and we're really excited to have her partner with us, and she has been blowing us away with her certainly research experience, but wisdom as to how you begin to learn about the program's supports and services. Staff have really been thinking, how on earth do we conduct a review? Special education and its topics is so very broad. We could be nominating so many very salient elements of how we deliver supports and services. While we were talking and thinking, I want you to know that so many times we cited back to themes that we have discussed at this table, themes that were important to you. The very point, thank you, David, for talking about how are we thinking about all students. We know that our students with special education needs bring to us intersectionality. They bring to us unique learning profiles. They have specific diagnoses. And at the heart of all of our conversation really was about achieving positive outcomes, what data was available. So you're going to be hearing from Jillian and David. What I also want to point out is when staff were thinking about this initial scope, we really concluded we can't just do one review because we are committed to looking at all students. So we talked about this being a journey, and this is the first part of a journey. And we want to have a cyclical approach to always look at our program supports and services. So this is going to be our initial analysis. We're going to be developing an implementation plan. We're going to be studying the differences that we make based on that implementation plan. And then we want to go deeper again and continue the cycle of reviewing the work that we're doing, involving SEAC in your advisory capacity, having you part of the consultation team, as well as the other members, as you have seen outlined in the report. But I've marked this as the beginning of our journey. So with that, I'll stop talking and turn it over to Jillian and David so that you can hear directly from them. Thank you.
Thanks, Louise. Really appreciate the intro. Thanks, Nandy. Just for clarification, we also have two researchers on this call, Sarah Armson and George Tam, who are going to lead with Jillian on the review. For folks who don't know me, I'm the senior manager of the research and development team. So it's great to be here. And thank you, everybody, for inviting me. I'm really excited for this particular review. I would like to follow with what Louise and Andy has said and talk about it. It's nested within the multi-year strategic plan, and it's not the only program, strategy, service, practice that we're putting under different kinds of evaluation cycles. So it is part of an internal review of program and services, in this case, special education. But I just wanted to contextualize what this is. It's not a one-off review. It's not a one-off report. And it certainly isn't something that is looking to realize any kind of fiscal efficiencies or anything like that. It's an internal review that explores the broad categories of support, whether that's accommodation, modification, whether that is complete inclusion into the classroom to congregated spaces. So that's kind of I wanted to kind of ground that or anchor that as an important part of not only this evaluation, but the evaluations across the what we're doing in the multi-year strategic plan. Is there a slide deck that's up and running? I can't tell from my little space. Okay, that's great. Could you possibly move go to slide? Now we're not going to go to as David, as you mentioned, we're not going to get into every slide. They're text heavy slides. They're meant to be traveling without us in them. So we welcome people who haven't had a chance to look at this to go into it in more depth, and certainly reach out to myself or Jillian or Sarah or George, or the research from either the research email, which we can provide, or Jillian has the email as well, to if you have any extra questions. So we are going to just kind of surface around and kind of go through an overview, and especially focus on the year one stuff, which Jillian's going to explore. So if you could go to slide 3 for me, or that would be great. I've lost the slide deck, so I don't know if it's up.
It's not yet up, David. Just hang tight.
Okay.
I will not break into song while we wait.
Oh, I was waiting for that.
Can I just note while you're looking at this that I gather the slide deck was sent out. It was not in my, I don't think I got it in an accessible form. So.
Well, yeah, I do think it was.
Oh.
Nandy, can you confirm?
Yeah. Okay, that's great. But just if David and Jillian can assume, I'm not looking at it. So if there's information I should know, it would be good to hear it from you.
Okay, thank you for that reminder. And we'll start with the guiding principles, Jillian.
Great, thank you. Just before I get started, I just wanted to quickly thank David and Louise and the committee for the warm welcome. I'm really excited about this review and really excited to be back and working alongside all of you. So thanks for that. Yeah, I'll speak a little bit to the guiding principles and the framework for this review. So this review adopts principles that adhere to equity, accessibility, and inclusion. And as such, we have selected to use a transformative program evaluation approach in which each of these principles are embedded. In addition, we draw on international, federal, and provincial disability rights guidelines and principles and examine disability through a social model lens. And as I'm sure all folks in the room know, that a social model approach really encourages us to focus on the conditions in which students are learning. And by drawing on the knowledge and experiences of those most closely involved in the special education system, such as students and parents and educators and staff, we hope to develop recommendations to better improve program and service delivery. And I wanted to also mention, David, you're absolutely correct. I think it is essential that we also draw on the kindergarten to grade 12 education standards. So thank you for flagging that.
Okay, thanks. Could we advance to slide 7? One more, I think. I'm looking for the review team, the advisory team, the consultation team, whoever's moving the slides around. There it is. Great, thank you. This is one of the most exciting pieces for me about this particular review, in that we're going to have a consultation team, which, as references, David, you referenced, is going to have hopefully two SEAC reps in it, but also you can see here the list of folks from staff that are also part of this consultation team. And the thing that's exciting about the consultation team, whether that's working with Tanya Sank or Karen Murray or Mahajibeen Ibrahim or other communities, central folk or community members in SEAC, is that the consultation team is embedded in the methods we're using. So we'll be looking at whether that's case study work that's part of this work, whether that's survey work that's part of this work, or that's quantitative analysis that's part of this work. And we'll talk briefly about the quantitative analysis for year one in relation to what we're looking at. We're going to, this team is involved in the analysis and the meetings that we're making, and going to be formative to the kinds of understandings we need to think through in a developmental evaluation frame in relation to formative work to get special education services to that continual improvement cycle that Louise just referenced. So I'm really very excited about this part of the review process. Can we go to the next slide?
Thank you. Dave, I think I can take it from here, hey, for the analysis part?
That's great. Thank you.
Excellent. Great. So I'm just going to share a little bit about kind of the vision for the first year or year one system analysis, and then I'll speak a little bit to how the review consultation team will work into this process, as well as address some of the questions that David raised at the very beginning of the meeting, because I think that we can speak to this as we go through. So for the year one system analysis, we are going to be looking at a variety of outcomes as they relate to program using a matching methodology based on EQAO achievement scores. And what we are looking specifically at is differences across students as they relate to program placement, so either partial or full-time self-contained special education classes, as well as students who receive accommodations and or modifications that are taught within the regular class. So while we'll hold students' achievement constant, we are exploring outcomes as they relate to the proportion of students who, and on the diagram here, it shows that have a 70% or higher average in grade 9, proportion of students taking the majority of their courses in grade 9 academic, because we do have some historical data we're working with, proportion of students who completed 3 or more U-level courses in grades 11 and 12, proportion of students who graduated within 5 years, and a proportion of students confirming post-secondary education. At this point, we're really looking at university and college participation when we talk about post-secondary. While there is limited data available, actually, if you could flip to the next slide really quick. Sorry about that. While there is limited data available on post-secondary pathways to and through apprenticeships, colleagues and I have just completed a report for the Ontario Council of Articulation and Transfer that could be helpful, and there's a link that's available within the PowerPoint attachment that you may have received. If not, feel free to email me directly and I can send you a copy. All right, if you can go to the next slide, that would be great. Thank you. So thanks, and thanks, David, for raising that point around the inclusion of all communities of students with disabilities in the system. You know, we are cognizant of the wide spectrum of disability represented in students accessing special education. And in particular, we ourselves are very concerned with omitting specific experiences, especially when we have like this broader all-encompassing analysis. So what we've decided to do for this initial analysis is to remove students who, one, are identified as gifted, and students who have identified as having a developmental disability who are also taught in a congregated class. The reason why we have selected to do this for the first stage is because students identified as gifted often have a starkly different academic trajectory than students in special education overall. And students identified with a developmental disability who are taught in self-contained classes are often working towards an alternative curriculum. But what we're looking at is doing a separate analysis that would mirror this larger one with both of those groups of students so that we can ensure that their distinct experiences are not lost within that larger picture. So that's that piece there. If we can move to the next slide, I'm just going to give you a quick example of what that first step of the analysis is going to look like. So here we have the sample analysis that looks at the grade 9, 2016 and 17 cohort data. And that year is the year that students would have been in grade 9. So they would have likely graduated in years 2020, 2021. If they were moving on to post-secondary, then we would look at that would be around 2021, 2022. And this what you're looking at on your screen are students who specifically have achieved a level 3 to 3.5 on their grade 6 EQAO math assessment. When we looked at our first graph that we wanted to show you does look at post-secondary confirmations. And what we found is that for students who are achieving at a 3 to 3.5 who are not involved in special education, access post-secondary education at a rate of about 81%, compared to 74% for students who receive accommodations while being taught in the regular class, and 73%, so very similar, for students who are on a modified curriculum but taught in the regular class. And this rate drops to 54% for students who are in a partially integrated program, and down to 36% for students in a fully self-contained placement. And so what we're hoping to do is once we have done this system analysis that looks at those factors, I described a few slides back, we're hoping to use those outcomes to guide us in the development of the survey and the focus group. And that is where the review consultation team will play a really critical role. So one, we're hopeful that this team will be able to work with us through that kind of initial data results piece, as well as in the reporting approach. And then we also hope that this team will really help advise and guide us in the development of our survey, which we hope to extend broadly across the TDSB, as well as develop the focus group protocols so that we can better understand not only these outcomes, but what David raised at the beginning, really looking into the experiences of students and families and educators and staff as they work within and through the special education system to ensure that that students' needs are being met, and certainly looking at how better to support. So thank you. I'll pass it back to you, David. Oh, I think you're on mute.
I am on mute. If Nandy, if we could go or just to the slides that shows the timeline. I'm not sure what the very back end slide, I think it is. There it is. So this represents roughly the timeline we're looking at in relation to the review cycles, and you can see that we're hoping to complete a system data analysis by March of this year, and we're hoping to start a survey or build and design survey work in April and May, and then to do some look at the reporting cycle in this one in terms of the summer of 2025. So that's like I know it seems like a really tight timeline given that it's January and I've had like 10 meetings today. So, but nothing like a tight timeline to get us going. So that's kind of the scope of this initial first pass at it, and we'll leave it there. Again, these have at these slides in more careful ways. There's lots of text, you can get through it, and also we're happy to take on feedback both here and later.
All right, thank you very much. Could people indicate either by raising their hand in the room or raising your virtual hand online if you want to contribute? I'm just going to start. Sorry? Oh, okay. And Tracy's building a speakers list. I want to thank our presenters. And obviously this is ambitious. It is important. And we want to do what we can to help. I want to just suggest some major flags I want to flag right away. One is that using EQAO scores as your measure has within it the risk of disability discrimination, because we've heard at this table I believe in past years that there are some students who don't do the EQAO because it may not be accessible to them. At which point they're out of the picture altogether and the measurements are not included at all. The second thing is that you've selected out one group from the perspective of disability, developmental disabilities, but you're only measuring performance on two academic subjects. As a representative for parents of visually impaired kids, a critical life skill is orientation mobility, learning to get around. None of the rest of it matters if you can't get around independently. It's part of the extended core curriculum, which the board commendably includes in what they teach, but there's no measurement of it. So any outcomes or conclusions are, from their perspective, distorted. And I suspect our members may have other observations that are similar. And my final point, which is more directed at TDSB staff, not at our two speakers, but we were told that we would be consulted from beginning to end on this process. But it looks like, yes, it's good that a couple of SEAC members, I'm hoping we can raise that to 3, will be part of this consultative team on design. But huge decisions have already been made on which we had no input. And I'm very concerned and frankly troubled by that. So that's my 2 bits. I don't need you to respond on that. I'm just providing my feedback. Tracy, how many have we got on the list?
Okay, we have 4 so far.
Our-
Richard is first online.
Okay, Richard, we're going till 10:02, and I suspect more people will contribute. So if you could do it within 3 minutes, that would be great.
Hey,
And-
thank you.
sorry.
Oh, thank you, David, and through you, Mr. Chair. I express similar, very, very deep concerns, being the representative of the Down Syndrome Association of Toronto, where many of the community members would be diagnosed with an intellectual disability, be it developmental disability or mild intellectual delay. It seems to me that this study will virtually completely eliminate that community from the study. And many people with Down syndrome, which is a genetic condition, not a disability, their exceptionalities span pretty well across the definition of exceptionalities by the province, from the intellectual, mild intellectual, autism, hearing impaired, etc. So for this community to be virtually excluded from this study just seems unreasonable and unthinkable by myself, and I would think much of the community. And the other thing is, like you refer to the EQAO. I know oftentimes within the DD classes, etc., those students aren't writing those, even in the MID classes. And, you know, when you get to the high school grades, there is not regular classrooms for these students. They're all segregated. So again, to leave this group of the population out there, and we know that it is a common 1 out of 800 or so conceptions results in a child with Down syndrome, seems to me we have to relook at this and how this group can be considered within there. Thank you.
Can I respond to that?
Sure.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. And thanks so much, Richard, for raising your concerns. I 100% agree with you that we would have to rethink the measures when looking at students with developmental disability, thinking about the factors we have around academic achievement in terms of outcomes, as well as the use of the EQAO, because I completely understand and am aware of those barriers and the inaccess that there is to that particular form of assessment. We are planning on doing, actually, specifically to your concern, we are planning on running a separate analysis for students with developmental disabilities that mirrors the larger one, and for the exact reason that we were worried that we were actually erasing that experience by including them within this larger project, specifically because we know students with developmental disability that are in a self-contained class are often working on an alternate curriculum towards an alternate report card. And we wanted to ensure that we captured that without it being overshadowed by the kind of the larger analysis, which sometimes quantitative analysis tends to do. So we're very cognizant, and we really are committed to ensuring that 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 narrative of experience is captured through this piece. We will also be reaching out to families and educators that are working with students with developmental disabilities, and hopefully to students themselves around their experiences in special education through the surveys as well as through the focus groups.
No, appreciate that, and just say that not all people with the genetic condition of Down syndrome necessarily are diagnosed as DD. They might be MID or might be somewhere else. So DD alone will not necessarily capture the entire audience. So thank you.
You're right. Yeah.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Thank you both. I'm getting mindful of time, but I know how important this is. Who's next? For me? Leo.
Yeah.
And I know you wanted a bit more time. I'll be flexible with you, but
Yeah,
take it away.
Thanks so much, David. I shortened it quite a bit. But before I get to my main commentary, I just wanted to briefly mention that the review had its design and methodology determined without SEAC involvement, and it's being presented to us as a finalized plan with very limited opportunities for SEAC participation. We had no input into the review's goals, methodology, or primary focus, which is problematic. And I also have very serious concerns with the fact you only have 2 people from SEAC in the review. We are a very, very diverse we are very diverse here, and we represent very different associations, and we all have very different lived experiences. So choosing only 2 people is very reductive of our opinions, which sometimes don't even agree. So that's the main point. Now, for the other point, I would say that representing Autism Ontario, we have a very large range of students. For the autistic students with lower support needs, I echo the concerns about the issues of using the EQAO. They would be excluded from the study, so I echo that concern. Whereas for the autistic students with higher support needs, you mentioned not using the QAO and standardized metrics, and that's actually slightly reassuring for this part of students that I represent. Many of the advocates and academics, autistic advocates and academics, they criticize our society. They often reduce individuals to productivity, judging their worth based on their ability to generate profit and efficiency. And this is a very narrow view of worth, which is inherently ableist, as it excludes and marginalizes those who do not fit into the normative conception of productivity, to which the school system is closely tied. So when you look at these kids with the greatest needs, like those with developmental disabilities, I'm just going to use one example. Diagnostic kindergarten, and also perhaps the congregated sites, their daily struggles and triumphs, they're very far removed from narrow confines of graduation statistics. And their parents are at peace with their reality. They don't measure their child's success by diploma or a cap or gown. They really don't care about that stuff. Their metrics are more profound and far more humane. If you ask these parents what success looks like, and we hear it all the time, you're going to hear back things like, is my child going to school? Is my child happy? Or even, and I have heard this one, is my child alive? Right? So these are not questions that are born out of complacency or just having a low bar. They're the questions of parents with lived experience who very realistically understand that their kids have always needed and will always need support their entire lives. And they're at peace with that. They are questions of parents who know that a child's worth is not measured by a standardized test like UAQAO or by a simple graduation ceremony, but by their well-being, their joy, and their participation in a community that values them as they are. So a narrow focus on academic metrics reduces our children to data points. It ignores their unique needs and experiences. It devalues their incredible efforts that are made by their families and educators to ensure that every child, regardless of ability, has a place in our school. And it perpetuates a system that prioritizes number over people, uniformity over diversity, and productivity over humanity. For these families, success in these programs is measured by participation, by happiness, by the simple yet profound act of going to school and being part of a community. I have spoken to older kids in ISPs who have told me, in my ISP, I have felt included for the first time because I found my people. So all I'm asking is that when you start reviewing outcomes for kids, and I truly have a problem with this word outcome because it, again, everything that I'm saying, when you're looking at the kids with developmental disabilities, please consider metrics that reflect their diverse needs. Attendance, engagement, well-being, and happiness, and mainly individual growth. Is the child making progress based on their unique abilities and goals? We should not value productivity over humanity and standardization over diversity. Thank you.
Thanks,
if I may, and Jillian and Dave, please add if I'm missing some of the concepts that we spoke about. Leo, thank you for speaking with passion and care as you always do. Absolutely, the measures that you are talking about are profoundly important. Looking at EQAO, because the data is readily available and it immediately, when you reviewed that chart that Jillian put up on screen, it immediately begs us to be wondering about the experiences in the different program supports and services that we need to follow up with questions to families and students themselves. And we are wanting to elevate their experiences of joy and friendship and sense of belonging. We imagine through the focus groups, we are going to be hearing very, very important themes to improve our services in schools, what is making a difference and why. So please know that all of those metrics are equally valued by us and will be part of the report back to SEAC. I also want to assure SEAC that your involvement as a full committee, there will be no, our other committees are not going to be as deeply as involved as you are. This is your mandate to advise. So although 2 members are going to be sitting on the consultation team, having us come and speak to the progress as well as the findings throughout will be something that we commit to and look forward to your feedback. Much of the scoping in the original analysis really has been born from other boards' approaches and strong research pedagogy.
Louise, I just want to make sure that we have time for other SEAC members who want to contribute while we've got 5 minutes left. I appreciate the response, but if it's possible, I'm eager to make sure that SEAC members get a chance to voice their
Understood,
views.
David. If I could just say respectfully, some of the concerns are so emotionally wrought. We want to be sure to hopefully reassure members who express them. Thank you.
That's fair. Thank you. All right. Next is Nora.
Thanks. So first of all, I want to congratulate the board for taking on a project like this. I haven't seen something that thorough for a long time. Or anything that's considered looking at all the programs. And that's a huge ambitious task. And I appreciate that. I do want to echo my concerns about a couple of things. David's about, you sort of wish we were involved a little earlier. Leo's about terms of outcomes and the, the extent to which we want to examine those as parents. And I guess a little bit on my part, a little bit of disappointment about the students with developmental disability and alternative programs being after we sort of start the other, which historically happens all the time. But I appreciate the fact that you've thought about that, and that should be starting next year. I have a little concern about kids with disabilities that are in gifted classes, knowing that there are kids with disabilities in gifted classes, and how are those kids going to be captured? We can't presume because their primary exceptionality is gifted that they're doing well. Some of them don't do well. So that'd be, I appreciate that's probably second to just to remind people. And I don't know, I'm looking forward to the partnership because I think it's pretty ambitious and I get how it's going to be dicey for you given the complexity of the kids and no single identification is going to represent most of the kids. So it's going to be an interesting project. So thank you for sharing and lots of respect for the research team. But I definitely feel like the committee is feeling like we need to be attached to monitoring that and more than probably just 2. And I appreciate you mentioned that, Louise, but I think this is near and dear and long waiting for all of us for something to have some accountability measures around what happens with special education programming.
Thank you. I think the last speaker, Steve, just hold on for a bit. Alana, I think you wanted to speak.
Thank you. And thank you to the research team as well. I think most of my concerns have already been addressed by other members of SEAC. One thing that I did think that hasn't been addressed, David spoke to the diversity of the students who are represented by SEAC. And I noticed that on the consultation team, there is the intention to include one educator who works with children with special needs and one student who has been supported in terms of their special needs. I wonder if that's really enough, given the diversity of the populations that we all come together here to support. And then again, I wanted to echo the concerns about postponing for now the research on students with developmental disabilities and gifted students. Gifted students make up, my helpful colleague here has some stats. Gifted students make up 69% of all students in ISPs. So to not be looking into that is leaving out a huge proportion of kids with ISPs. And I understand that that is going to be looked at a little bit later. And I hear that the process is going to mirror the other process, but I wonder, what does that mean to mirror the process that is being carried out now? And also, when will that occur?
Steve, can you contribute in like a minute?
Yes.
Go for it.
Hi, thank you for presenting this to us. Personally, I'm looking very much forward to the results of the findings that you're currently taking on. I do believe that you're working from a flawed data set if you're ever thinking of assessing the needs of special ed children. The EQAO excludes way too many people, from Indigenous to kids with special needs, to kids that just aren't willing to do it. So, but with that in mind, I hope this gives you a very clear path forward on what kind of data you need to mine from the TDSB, a data set that fits, because and I know that's going to be difficult. So I hope going forward, this provides you with a good analysis of what data sets you're going to need to support all the other children that are not represented by EQAO. And I hope it comes along quickly, and that the next plans to support these kids will be as effective as this one.
Thanks, Steve. Jillian, I know you have your hands up. I'm just going to make one quick comment and then over to Jillian to have the last word. But don't feel you have to answer my comments at all. Number one, the fact that we are going to have a fraction, a tenth of this committee sitting on the implementation committee, volunteering more time, surrounded by staff, who are not volunteers, it's part of their job, is no answer when the overall direction of the study is at least a source of concern. I can tell you that if we had been approached at what should be the focus of the review before decisions were made, I would have had very significant suggestions of which this wouldn't form any part of it. And I suspect other committee members around the table might feel the same. So I've significant consternation with the board for telling us about the extent of our consultation, but rather being included in how to implement something that may be ultimately somewhat wrong-headed. The second thing is, I want to say is that even within that, deferring some of the most needy kids to a later analysis, I think has priorities backwards. But with that, that's the feedback, and I regret that I don't think it will have any impact on the result. Jillian, you wanted to wrap up?
Sorry, I just wanted to address the concern I've heard from a few speakers around the delay analysis for students with developmental disabilities and students who are identified as gifted. That is happening now. That is happening while we do this larger analysis. I know that in the plan, there will be further focus on students who are pursuing an alternative pathway in the following year. But at this point, when we're doing the system analysis, we will be running those analyses for all those groups of students at this time. So it won't be, isn't being pushed down the line. We do want to make sure we take it up at the same time. And that doesn't have to be the final word also, but thank you so much.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. And good luck with it and whatever we could do. Our next item on the agenda, Nandy, can you just help me and let me know if Jim Spropoulos is here?
Thanks, everyone.
We're ready to go with his topic, or I can move to the next agenda item and then put it on hold when he arrives.
Thank you. Thank you, David and Jillian. Jim, are you online right now? Sorry, I'm just trying to scroll through my my screen here. I don't see or hear a response, David, so we can go to another item and then come back if that's okay with you.
Let's jump to the town hall. And what I was proposing, and Nandy, just absolutely interrupt us mid-sentence if it's when Jim shows up, and I'll just hold this topic down and we'll get back to it after. All right, with respect to the town hall, for those who are watching and didn't know, we held a town hall that was highly successful last November, where we invited parents of students with special education needs to come and tell us what barriers their kids face and what they recommend to fix it. We heard from 60 people. Their stories were difficult to hear, heartfelt, and raised important issues. We've actually got sort of two things to discuss at this point. One is I want to focus on low-hanging fruit. A number of the problems that were identified involved a recognition that there aren't enough staff and resources. Could we ask the province for more? That's not happening overnight. Like, province isn't going to change that overnight. But others we wanted to focus our attention on now is what could be done in the short term. What's readily achievable? What's doable? And I'd asked the staff to come back to see, they've had 2 months to review and analyze the results of the town hall, and maybe they can let us know what low-hanging fruit they see. And then we can go around the table and brainstorm what we see. The other point I want to raise, and we can talk about it all, we don't have to parcel it into 2 separate boxes. There was significant talk last November in the wake of this event among us and some of the presenters of doing this again sometime this year. I received word from staff that there is a reluctance to do it again this year, so I thought it would be helpful if staff could tell us the basis of their reluctance. And I want to get at least a feeling in the room what committee members feel. Whether we would want, like, if the committee doesn't want to do it again this year, we don't need to take it any further. If committee members feel that there is a benefit in doing it again this year, then we can approach staff and find out what their reservations might be and how we might address those. So with that, maybe Nandy, you could help us out just at the start. And when we talk about brainstorming ideas, by the way, staff did an excellent job of preparing a report, an analysis of sort of what are the common themes. And thanks to them, it's not easy. And helping us even further is the unstoppable Diane Montgomery, who volunteered to take her own cut at it. And what she's done is identified the same themes and 4 more. And there's no magic in all these, in my view. You could package all of these differently, but the question really boils down to, can we identify for today some low-hanging fruit, some immediately achievable things that could at least help make things better for the parents we heard from and others with similar experiences. So Nandy, maybe you could just start and let us know both if there is a reluctance about doing a new town hall this year, what the basis is, and second, what, if any, low-hanging fruit staff are thinking about.
Leanne, thank you. Just a minute, please. I'll respond to that, and then we'll go from there. So we are so pleased to collaborate with SEAC, and we're very happy with the feedback and listening to the experiences that were shared by families at the town hall. There are a number of projects underway, and I'll pass it over to Louise to speak to that in terms of why we are not looking right now to have another town hall immediately. So Louise, I'll pass it over to you, please. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks very much, Nandy, and thanks for the opportunity. David, we received your request, and the relationship between staff and SEAC is one that's very important to us, to have a positive relationship. SEAC members, I think what I'd like you to be feeling from the work that we are doing is that we are very much dedicated to be responsive to your ideas. When Chair Lepofsky asked for a town hall, there's never been, to our understanding, a town hall led by SEAC in any board. Not that I am aware. It was out of the box thinking. And honestly, welcoming parents in an open forum to talk about their experience. There were concerns about privacy and so on our behalf, and we worked really, really collaboratively to make a very successful event that gave us a lot of information from the select parents that came out to tell, as I think David said, heart-wrenching stories. Staff are not able to support a repeat town hall this year. We may not even be able to commit to that next year. So I want to be just really very clear about staff's ability to support your request for a town hall.
Can you just help us by telling us?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you. The amount of time that staff had to dedicate to support the town hall was significant. The other commitment that we made that you saw evidence just a minute ago was to embark on a very extensive review that is right now all-consuming for the leadership team. And that will be another very scientific way for us to be elevating the experiences of families, correlating that to the data that we have, again, to be drawing findings and to be pointing forward to ways to improve our program supports and services. So that is our commitment. As well, the information that parents shared with us during the town hall, and what, David, I'm hoping that you're going to facilitate, is the crystallization of important themes from parents that SEAC and staff agree on are the 3 priorities for an action area, so that we're able to mobilize our improvement planning to make experiences better. The time required for that implementation and to see change will be significant, so that when we are elevating the experiences from families, that we need to see a time frame pass to see that the changes that we put in place are making a difference. Having repeat very quick snapshots of data from a select group of people won't give us the information that we need to know that we're making a difference. So those are the reasons why, David. I hope that's been helpful. Again, want to underscore the collaboration that we are committed to, but I do need to be mindful of how the team is taxed on the work that we're doing. And again, it's the action plan coming from our parents, as well as the commitment to lift the review that we're embarking on right now. Thank you for the opportunity.
All right, I understand. Thank you, Louise. And I'm going to defer this subject for a few minutes. Jim Spiropoulos, I gather, is now here. And we are now talking about the issue of refusals to admit students or exclusions of students from school, either on a full-time basis, meaning your child can't come at all, or on a part-time basis, which we discussed at our last meeting, modified school days. And at our last meeting, we ran out of time, and I committed that we would have more time because staff, Jim, just to bring you up to speed, and Happy New Year. It's nice to be talking again. I haven't seen you in a while. Staff have, at the last meeting, basically said, we're doing basically what we can in this area. And so I wanted us brainstorming what ideas we might have of what more staff could do within the authority they have. That doesn't need new legislation or new funding or whatever, but is within their mandate. And my aim was for us to go around the table. Now, in my chair's report, I listed a few ideas that I'm putting on the table. The most obvious of which we learned at our last meeting that each principal has to fill out a form every month reporting to the center how many students are on a modified school day. And that's good. But that form doesn't ask how many students or how many student days are lost to an exclusion, a full day exclusion. There's no reason that couldn't be added to the form. It's the same form, or a second form if they need it. Similarly, there is no attendance code that distinctively applies when a student is absent for a refusal to admit, or being told to go home, or not to come in, whatever they want to call it. That attendance code could be created. You'd immediately have at a push of a button the data you need to know how common these are. So those are a couple of ideas. I want to go around the table to ask for others, but the other thing my report asked for, and Jim, just so you'll know about this, my chair's report went to senior staff here. Under the operational procedure that the Toronto District School Board adopted for refusals to admit in January of 2019, as a result of advocacy by this committee, there was a policy or a stated requirement that a quarterly report would be made to Executive Council of the board of how many refusals to admit there had been in that quarter. And I asked if we could have those quarterly reports for the past 2 years. I don't know if anybody's ever done them. It would be helpful to know, and if we could have those. So Jim, if you want to give us a few comments first, and then we can go around the table and just have people brainstorm ideas of how we can assist the board in being on top of this, because the board has expressed at our committee a commitment to try to get as good a handle on this as they can.
So let me start off by saying, Chair David, Happy New Year. Thank you so much for having me. Chair, you framed it perfectly like you do, because every single time that I've come to SEAC, it's been as part of working towards growth and improvement and getting better. And your comments, your introductory comments, set the stage perfectly for that. Tonight, Audley and Nandy asked me to come to provide some information with respect to data and numbers and where we're at, and to engage in some conversation around refusal to admit specifically. And every single chance that I've had to talk about this around the province or even in our city, talking specifically about PR 724, David, you were very gracious in your introduction, but we owe a deep debt of gratitude to two specific individuals. And I'm going to acknowledge those two people every single time I talk about TDSB's PR 724 refusal to admit. Even though I was working in Caring and Safe Schools in 2019, there were two people who were instrumental in moving this, what I believe was groundbreaking work forward. Ted Libera and David Lepofsky. And David, I've heard you say from many microphones and many podiums that this procedure is far, far from perfect. But it's absolutely more than so many other school boards around the province have. And while we continue to improve in this area, we have to be very clear on the levels of accountability that are attached to it. This information related to refusals to admit, everyone, is very, very sensitive. In the province of Ontario, there are only 3 reasons why students can be absent from school based on what the board imposes. First are suspensions and expulsions, which is our PR 697. Second is the Trespass to Property Act, which is through an O regulation of the province. In our procedure, I believe it's 523. And the third one is what we're talking about tonight, and that's refusal to admit. It's very, very sensitive information because it involves children being excluded from school where they have a human right to attend. And we take great care and consideration with respect to how we deal with these numbers and how we share these numbers, because there is the potential for students to be identified through the disclosure of these numbers. And I can say this, as we've pored over this data for the last 3 years. Those numbers for the last 3 years fall within the threshold of potentially identifying students if the information is shared publicly. But I know that that may not be enough for the members of the committee, because there's probably people sitting around the table, and I'm sorry for not being able to be there personally, but I can sort of sense that there may be people around the table saying to themselves, Jim, this is happening a lot more than you may think. And it's happening a lot more than you may be able to capture. But I do want to share some information that I think will be relevant to the group, because as I was mining the data, I thought, what information could I share that won't potentially identify a child or a family, especially families of students who have already experienced trauma from being told that they can't come. I'll say this about this school year so far, because we don't risk identifying any, because in our system, there are none. There are none thus far this school year. And although I can't say with specifics that it was number 4 or number 7 or number 8 going back for the 3 years, I will say that after careful consideration and having spoken to David Cameron about what may be involved, that at this point in time, the specific numbers can't be shared. But I'm going to go back to the point that I just made. And that is about the fact that people are hearing about exclusions. This information is out there. And I remember having conversations with Ted going back a long time about what our database says versus what the reality of the situation is. And I don't want to do a bureaucratic soft shoe and say that the database is absolute. And we knew that for a time, for example, before the database was created and before 724 was updated, that there were some principals who may have had homemade letters and may have been sending students home without paperwork. And part of the reason why this procedure was updated was to avert that. And here's what I have to say. If there is anyone, and I say this knowing that the name on the procedure is the Executive Superintendent of Human Rights and Indigenous Education. And even though the titles may have changed, I know the fact that Caring and Safe Schools plays a significant part in this. And if anyone on this committee or anyone anywhere, and I say this wherever I go and I speak about this procedure, knows about a child who is sent home without paperwork, we need to know. That should not be happening here or anywhere. With respect to the quarterly reports, the executive superintendents of the learning centers know. Executive council, however, does contain members. So if I were to walk into exec council and say, last quarter there were 2, again, there is potential for those 2 children to be identified. So the executive superintendents know. Principals definitely know. The families know. And we don't run the risk of identifying. But I think it's important for us to go a step further. And while we're brainstorming, Chair David, you put an idea out there and you said, let's go around the table. I want to start the going around the table. Because there are additional, as we were sort of brainstorming around this, there is one additional measure we can take. One of the things that we have done with respect to caring and safe schools to more closely monitor, for example, reasons why students were being sent home is to lock certain reasons, and they can never be unlocked without the permission of a superintendent. So, for example, we knew that breach to a school code of conduct was a catch-all, which many principals were using to suspend students, and we knew that it was bias-laden. We locked it. We said you can't use it unless it is unlocked by your superintendent with your executive superintendent's approval. And I'm proposing tonight that we do the exact same thing. So it is a systemic measure which doesn't just rely on word of mouth, but rather builds in a control, a safeguard into the database. So a principal will never be able to, if they're doing the proper paperwork, be able to bypass their superintendent or their executive superintendent, because we will be able to deal with that through the system. I don't want to go on for too long because I'm happy to hear from you, and I'm happy to take any questions and stay as long as you need me to follow up with my comments. And again, I just want to thank you for having me, and I appreciate Nandy and Audley extending the invitation through you, Chair David.
All right, I'm going to just give a quick, number one, thank you very much. And you're as much a straight shooter as Ted Libera was, and why we got so much progress. I'm going to offer a couple of comments. I'm also going to then have us go around the table if people can indicate if they want to throw out their ideas. And I may let this eclipse the rest of our discussion about the town hall and push that into our February meeting, because this is too important. And we're at a good point. Jim, a couple of quick points. Number one, I respectfully disagree that revealing a total number of how many exclusions in a year the board has done would tend to identify any children. If we were told there were 3, we have no idea who they are. There's 580 schools. There's 40,000 students with special education needs. Just saying who the numbers, there's 250,000 students, right? I mean, if we said, tell us the school, that would be different, or the learning center, but we're not saying that. Just a total for the board will reveal nothing about who the child is. Not only that, but as a matter of logic, that is so. But as well, at this very committee, giving us feedback on exclusions, on what's being done about it. Nandy, you can help me, whether it was a year and a half ago. It was before I was chair, but Nandy did a very good report to us on what the procedures are and what the numbers were for the past couple of years. And frankly, not for a moment have I heard a word that, oh my gosh, being told at this committee that there were whatever the number was, and I don't remember, somehow that told us which child it might have been or it was. So, and if it was, I know Nandy Palmer, she wouldn't have disclosed it. But finally, Jim, I'll tell you that if that were the case, if we're disclosing this, the numbers in a quarterly report, a total number in a quarterly report to Executive Council would have revealed numbers or identities to the Executive Council. The school board would never have included the requirement to make those quarterly reports in its operational procedure. That operational procedure was months and months in the development.
Mhm.
It's not something they just pulled out of their nose one day.
Mhm.
But I'll give you an even if we set aside this concern, the real problem, and staff have raised this with us in discussions, is okay, the board's numbers are low. The feedback from some committee members is that in actual experience, it's higher, meaning some principals may not be filling out the paperwork and telling the center they're doing this. We need safeguards. So wherever you stand on the issue I just spent a couple of minutes talking about, one safeguard would be having them fill out the form that they monthly have to submit on modified days. But another idea, how about this? How about the school board establish a phone number that parents can call if their child's been excluded from school? And publicize it on the website. We would tweet it to the world, and that would enable you to know right away. They can get a call. The school board at the receiving end, it could go to Caring and Safe Schools, could reach out and find out if it really happened. Who knows? Maybe it did, maybe it didn't. Or our associations who get calls from parents can refer it over to you. That is a way to help plug that gap. And you could make it even better if you have an announcement on your website that says every child has the right to go to school. Anyway, that's me. Let's go around the table. Who else have we got? Richard, let's go to Richard first.
Thank you, Chair David.
Thank you, David. Just one quick question for David before I ask my questions. I know we received your chair's report as correspondence. Are you wishing that the section exclusion refusals to admit students to school, either full day or partial day exclusions, all your comments there form part of this discussion that we're having right now, as you've alluded to?
I'd be happy if it were. There's just,
Okay.
the fact is that my report shows that these are ideas that have been shared with staff who are genuinely asking us what more can they do.
So my question to staff, two questions. In terms of your comment about the attendance code, David, is the suggested attendance code within the purview of the TDSB to create that code? And is the TDSB saying that they are unable to implement such a code due to exposure or identification of said students? That would be the two questions I have around that attendance code, just to know, is it possible for the TDSB to do it, or is this a provincial thing? And if it is doable, will the TDSB do it, or is there a reason they won't? Thank you.
Okay, Jim, if you want to keep notes, and I'm going to get as many people to give feedback, and if you want to respond to things, that's great, or if you want to follow up later and just take these under consideration, that's also fine. We can follow up. Leo?
Hi, thanks. Jim, you said there were 0 this year, and I'm really sorry, Jim, but we already spoke to many families have been excluded this year at Autism Ontario. We have the benefit of representing a lot of families. We could fill the Rogers Center with how many families that we represent. And in the school board here, we're talking about thousands, right? So we get a lot of calls. This means that some principals are up to something, right? And I think this is really a communication or an organizational problem in which policies are not being enforced. It can really be very subtle, you see. Like if a parent doesn't know what their rights are and a principal suggests to a new parent that's coming into the school that their kid will not be able to be supported in that classroom, that's actually soft exclusion, even if you're not filling out paperwork or actually signing a document. The parent's going to think twice before sending the kid to the school if the parent says, I don't think we're going to be able to support your kid, right? Like your kid's too challenging, right? And we're super understaffed, so think twice. He's probably just going to be abandoned in the corner somewhere, right? There are no papers, but what are you going to do if you're a parent that actually cares about your kid, right? You're going to keep them home, or you're going to go to private school. I was even telling staff the other day of one kid who typically gets an email from the teacher, and the email is very simple. It says, I think is the best example, because the email is as simple as, "Good morning, I'm just letting you know that we are understaffed today." That's it, that's the email, there's nothing else. But if you knew what the kid is like, you would read between the lines. For a kid with high needs, that email is exclusion, because if you bring your kid in, you don't want to do that. Otherwise, your kid's going to have a very difficult day, and you're going to have to pick him up, and you're going to have to leave in the middle of your work, right? So with all that in mind, it is a challenging problem, but putting on like a consulting hat I would say that it being an organizational policy and a cultural problem within the organization, the way that you fix cultural problems in the organization is you have to establish leadership at the highest level. So something like establishing a zero tolerance policy for exclusion coming directly from the director of education, saying that no exclusions will be tolerated. If any principal is discovered doing something like this, will be fired instantly. That's zero tolerance. That's the way that you change the culture. That's number one. Number two, David hinted at it. I think it's a great idea. Put it up on the website for parents, but run something more than that. Make it intense. Make an education campaign for parents about what their rights are, namely their right not to be excluded. Because then you're going to have parents who are going to be able to challenge those principles. If the rule is not coming top down, then at least the parents are going to be able to question that and not take that for an answer, right? And be able to push it through. And that is not a catch-all, because then we talk about bias and we talk about families that have other systemic challenges and I've spoken to many myself, and they're like, no, I can never challenge the school. The school knows best. Like, I don't even speak English correctly. How am I going to say anything? You really think that parent's going to come up to the principal and say something? They're not. They're scared, so they're afraid. I've had a parent that actually came to me and said, "Do you think the school is going to retaliate against my kid if I do anything?" That's so common. Like, I'm sorry, but it's completely bonkers that, the front lines are so disconnected. It's a complete organizational failure. I'm sorry, but thank you.
Nora?
Thanks.
And just Bronwyn, I know just one sec, Nora. Bronwyn, I know you want to speak about the town hall. I'm going to give you, even though we're going to be deferring some of that, I will get you a chance to speak because I don't want you to feel like you're bottling it up. Nora, go ahead.
Okay.
Take all the time you need because I cut you off last month because we were out of time.
I'm going? Okay. We talked about building relationships and fostering relationships between the committee and staff. And I appreciate the research project and the commitment and the dedication on staff's part to that. But I have to say on this topic, I am exceedingly frustrated. I think we've repeatedly explained the multitude and myriad of ways in which children are excluded from school. This does not include kids who show up and register for school and people see them arrive using a chair. And next thing you know, does those three ways, Jim, that you mentioned include kids who are held out when they're assessed for safety? And all those days that are happening while some child's at home, while staff's trying to get out there and decide what the school needs. Where is that absent captured? The absences that Leo mentioned. So people are acting as though we don't understand the problem because we have this PR and that PR and this PR, but those PRs aren't capturing the multitudes of ways in which our children are missing days in school. So what we're talking about is how are our children missing days in school and who is responsible for tracking that? So I appreciate the fact that measures have been taken and that staff are taking it seriously. I get that. But to come and say, because we have data that says almost nothing, and then say to us, we have to bring the children forward, I'm almost speechless about that, because the amount of power that and confidence it would take to take on a system by yourself, I think most of us, even sitting at this table, feel intimidated coming in to advocate for our children. And if we're sitting this high up in this room and we have concerns or worries when we go to meetings about our children, how does your average family do that? I've never met a family who has told me their child is out of school that didn't bring up repercussions for their child, particularly when their child cannot verbally speak. So I'm trying to find grace. I do want to build relationships, but on this particular topic, if it's so low, by tomorrow or the end of the week, there will be a billboard when you click on special ed that says, if your child is out of school, contact this number. Because you would be so confident there would be no calls to it.
Okay, sorry. Steve. Okay, Steve, well, actually, Bronwyn, do you mind if we wrap up this discussion? Then I have you jump in on your town hall point, or do you want to, I said I would bring you in.
I'm fine, whatever works for you.
Okay.
I'm fine. So wait, yep.
Just don't forget what you were going to say. Steve.
Hi.
Oh, I won't.
Hi, Jim. First, thanks so much for coming and presenting this information and hearing how concerned and upset we are. Two quick things. Saying that you cannot give us a total number of students that were subject to refusal to admit is, as David alluded to, I'm sorry, but that's absurd. When we get budget information, we hear how many kids are in DD. We know how many kids are having psych assessments. We know how many psych assessments were done. Do we know who those kids are? No. So to say, and this is a very big deal because every single person from the board that addresses this issue says, we can't tell you how many. That's kind of scary. The other thing is, and I have brought this up to previous directors of education at this board, this board could lead the province and simply say, we do not use refusal to admit. I was told by a senior staff who's not here anymore that, well, it's in the act. We have to. And I'm sorry, that goes against every basic human principle that I can imagine. What is so hard about saying the TDSB does not use refusal to admit on our students? That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. I'm going to, do we have anybody else on this topic? Okay, Jim, I'm just going to add one more reflection on my part. For those who didn't know, the name that Jim referred to, Ted Libera, used to work in Caring and Safe Schools. He appeared before this committee when we first raised this issue in 2018. And in the highest tradition of a good public servant, he came in and said at the time, we don't have a policy, we don't have a procedure, and it could vary arbitrarily from school to school. And the then director of education, John Malloy, said that they were going to try to rein this in, and work was done. And the dialogue between SEAC and this committee was a very constructive one. We didn't get everything we wanted, but we had a significant impact. And Ted came back probably 3 or 4 times with drafts and then improved them on our feedback. And the result, I think, was a very substantial improvement and is better than what most other school boards have. Maybe at the time it was better than what all other school boards have. And I genuinely believe our senior special education staff want that policy to be implemented. But at the same time, there's a huge distance between what's told to them in writing and what is actually happening in schools. So, and to that end, in his tradition of the highest traditions of a good public servant, Ted Libera very candidly told us it's going to be hard to get this to reach and affect principals who just decide to tell someone not to bring their kid in, but who don't invoke the policy and give it the label refusal to admit. Well, that essentially could gut the policy. And the very concern you're hearing, Jim, from us is the possibility of that gap between what the board said should happen and what is happening. And that's why the recommendations, that all of which are doable, recommendations like the hotline, like the web posting, like having standard advice given to parents if their child is being excluded. Those kinds of things don't cost anything. And they would help special ed staff here make that policy stick, which is their goal. So it would be very helpful. Jim, if you want to give any wrap up, we'd be happy to have you do that. But if not, it would be helpful if staff could take away these ideas and maybe come back to us with what additional steps staff think might be practical to help. I would add one more, by the way, if it's not already in the materials that you've sent out, and it may already be in there, but from what we've heard from families at SEAC and so on, a direction to principals that they may not simply tell a family, you know, their education assistant or special needs assistant didn't come in today, so don't bring your child in. I mean, that per se should not happen. Jim, do you want to close out with anything, or do you want to just take this away and follow up with us at a future date?
I will be very brief because I know how precious each minute is of this committee. David, I feel almost as though you were speaking with Ted in the lead up to this meeting, because when we spoke some time ago as I was preparing, he said, Jim, what David and I both said when we were about to finalize this procedure through the Board of Trustees and for their information was that we were going to have to battle what it said on paper and what principals did each and every day without it actually going through a portal or some official capacity. That is our challenge. I've taken the points that you have put forward tonight, and I will gladly come back after speaking with staff to provide an update with respect to the progress that we may be able to make, so that this procedure, which was put together, and as you have said, David, and as others have said, is far from perfect, as I said earlier, but really is good work, can come to life more, and that there will never be a day in TDSB where we don't have the systems in place which keep principals from saying to a child or to a family, your child isn't welcome here. So I'll leave it at that. And again, I want to thank you.
Thank you very much. And if you could email me when or let Nandy and the staff know when you're in a position to come back. And if you can accept our invitation to review your view, reconsider your view that you can't give us a total number for the year. And then let's take it from there. Bronwyn, on the issue of the town halls, I'm going to take it over to you.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you, David.
Yep.
I am very, very disappointed that the town hall will not be happening again this year, and that there's also been concerns about it even happening next year. I think this was one of the best things I've ever seen the TDSB do in my time as a parent, as also a person who grew up within the TDSB with disabilities. I actually read that document over and over and over again with my own disabilities of dyslexia, and it was bloody hard, but I did it. And I was just wanting to almost cry. It was cry because I was so happy that those parents finally had their voices heard to everyone. Not all of, that's just a small group. Imagine if we were able to reach more families in the TDSB. But now I feel like we've just been shut down again. And I feel very, very disappointed. I feel like there is no hope ahead. I'm sorry. I feel completely very distraught about this decision. And I hope that Louise and Nandy, you please look into this again. If you don't want to do it in a formal way in staff, that is fine, but I think you need to look to the families and put surveys out and ask them, do you want us to do this again? How did this make you feel as a parent in the TDSB? Not how it made us feel as staff. And I appreciate the speakers here who are doing all their research and things, but how much money are you putting into this compared to the money that we had for that town hall? And really, what are we doing for the families and those kids at the end of the day compared to your study with one kid and, you know, a couple of educators? I am just distraught, and I truly hope you take this away and reevaluate how this is showing the fear of the TDSB, and actually that this hit them so close to home, and sort of calling things out, not directly you, Louise, not directly you, Nandy, but the staff that are in there that who do not have the training. You need to bring this as an emergency to the ministry to alert them on what's happening in your school board. This is huge, and it is something that is being shut down, and I am very upset.
All right. Thank you, Bronwyn. Richard, you've got your hand up. Can you do it in a minute?
Under a minute, David. So
Go
I was
for
going to
it.
basically say, given that the work has already been done to boil down some of the key topics, is there no way somebody can come up with a one-page rubric showing which ones of these items can be quickly, hopefully, addressed, just as an effort in goodwill, and get those ones addressed? And if town halls in the future, like this year or next year, may not be possible, let's put the call out there to people to let them know they can come and delegate to the TDSB SEAC on these topics, and bring them to the meetings. If we can't have a town hall where we capture a lot of people in a very short amount of time, then let's start bringing them into each of the meetings and get some of these topics back front and center. Thank you.
Okay, number one, that's very helpful. Number two, I want us all to take this away and reflect on it. There are ways we can proceed, even if staff have decided that they don't support our doing it. And you've raised a good idea. There are other ideas. I'd rather not take up our time on it now. I welcome emails with anyone's thoughts between now and the next meeting. At the next meeting, I do want to have us again focus on what are the quick fixes or low-hanging fruit. And I'm going to ask staff if they could begin the discussion. By then it'll be February, and see any ideas they're working on, so we can build on that. With that, let's go to Nandy for the leadership report.
Thanks, David. I just have a couple of things to share. We will be having our first special education AQ that's written for TDSB specifically. That was approved by the Ontario College of Teachers for our first offering, which will begin in January. We actually have 25 registrants, so we had to close registration because that's quite a large class, and we're hoping to offering again in the spring and the fall. So really good that teachers are signing up for these AQs so that they can better support students with disabilities and special education needs and intersecting identities across the TDSB. We've also created a transitions website for parents, guardians, and caregivers, and it's been put on the TDSB special education website. And it's chock full of really good information and resources to support students, families, and educators in navigating transition processes, whether it's school to school, grade to grade, or secondary to post-21, and workplace, college, universities, and so forth. So really good website with lots of external resources as well, from everything on how to apply for disability for students and families who might need that, how to apply for a passport, lots and lots of different pieces. So please check that out if you haven't had a chance to. It's linked in the leadership report. And again, there's a button for it on the TDSB Special Education external site. And we had started this a few years ago of providing some data from the PAC on SEAC calendar. And one of those pieces was suspension and expulsion data. And of course, we have for the previous years, the report hasn't gone out, the Caring and Safe report as yet, but we did attach it to the mail out with the information there, as well as an abridged version in the leadership report. And we are happy to share that we've been continuing our partnership with Apple and Google to look at applied behavior analysis and ABA supports. How do we use technology such as iPads to support students with communication, early literacy, and other academic skills as well. And we're able to fund this through the C funds, of course, and using assistive technology to support access to learning and curriculum for students. That's it. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Questions? Anyone? I'm going to hold myself to the end. People can just identify yourself if you want to ask a question. Okay, Diane and then Nora. Anybody online? All right, Diane.
Yeah, I just have one question about the special education course that you're offering. So is it for existing teachers? I assume so. And I know in the town hall, there was a lot of comments about teacher education and training and all of this stuff that sounds like maybe it's an introduction. I know it's like an introductory course, but it's great that you're offering it. But the number 2025, you know, obviously they've got to start somewhere. Is there a plan to somehow expand that? I know you have to consider budgets and so forth, but I think a big part of training, and I know TDSB has a hard time because it's a big place and you're trying to train, but I find that some of the training may not be getting to the people who need it the most. Sometimes it goes to the resource teachers who already have it. Sometimes it goes to certain people who have to tell other people. So I just wanted to find out, do you have a plan? Like, what's the plan for this particular initiative of expanding it more, and what's involved, and how will this information maybe address some of the things that's happening at the town hall?
Thanks, Diane. So we offer professional learning in multiple ways. Some are self-directed, some are mandatory in terms of staff attending. So we do monthly offerings for our MARTs and ACLs. We also do for specific teachers that we pay for release time for teachers to access. So it's a lot of varied ways that we try to reach teachers. This was a rigorous process. 20 to 25 teachers is a big number, and it's one class full for our first offering. So we were very, very happy with that number. It had to be approved by the Ontario College of Teachers. So we can't just write a course and say, here we go. We have to go through a very rigorous process with the OCT. And I'm actually proud to say ours was approved at the first go around, because they send back numerous times AQ proposals, if you will, to school districts and institutions or universities trying to offer these. So did we not put it in here, Effie, the January course, professional learning offerings? I need to check, but we've been providing SEAC with monthly updates with all the offerings that we put out to our system and staff at different levels. And I think we do a really good job at offering many, many sessions for staff to build capacity. And that's on top of the day-to-day work that our department staff do, being in schools. And that's what we really try to focus on, is not to use our time, you know, at our computers doing other things, but actually to be in schools, building the capacity of staff to support students.
Great, thank you. Nora.
Yeah, thank you. Nanny, I'm hoping maybe you can help me. As we mentioned, I'm worried about how many days special education students miss, and there's a multitude of ways, as I may have mentioned before. That 50% of the suspensions and expulsions, it sort of references there's a plan in working with Safe and Caring Schools about why 16% of the population's half the suspensions. So what can you give me an idea of what that plan means? Like, what are we talking about how to reduce half the suspensions being just special education students?
Thanks, Nora. So While historically we have seen that a huge portion of students being suspended are students with special education needs, in the last Caring and Safe reports, which has, historical data in it, that's why I attached it. You'll see that for the first time, I believe 7 to 10 years or 7 years, I want to say, that number has actually been decreasing. And that's because of intentional work that we do with Caring and Safe around looking at each and every student and looking and training staff to Diane's earlier question around mitigating factors, and that you can't approach suspensions of students with disabilities and special education needs the same way you would students who do not have disabilities and special education needs. So we're seeing a change in terms of lesser numbers, but the numbers are absolutely still way too high or disproportionate. And so we're going to continue to build that capacity into under the Ed Act principles that have the responsibilities for suspension. So we're going to continue to work with our school administrators and superintendents around mitigating factors in particular, and other approaches that we could be using, such as restorative approaches and other pieces that we need to look at.
Can I just say thank you? And I love if the research that we're doing with Jillian, and I understand there's a survey going out, it would be interesting somehow to work in absences into that. And how that contributes to outcomes, because we know if you're not coming to school, it's pretty hard to achieve. So maybe that survey could include something about absences and the multitude in ways in which kids have missed school.
So I love SEAC's eagerness to cover everything in this review, because I was the same way, and so was the rest of the staff, because we want to look at it all. While this one may not, Nora, specifically look at attendance and some other pieces, we have that in our long-range plans to look at all of those aspects, including, for example, one that I'll state here is looking at workplace opportunities for students with special education needs and disabilities when they leave. We just have to really scope what we look at each time. And so we're really committing to, long after I'm probably gone from the TDSB, continuing to look at these pieces or these reviews, if you will.
Great. Richard, can you do it in a minute? Sorry you keep doing this, but I'm just watching the clock.
No worries, consider it done. So question on the AQ qualification course. I noticed you've gone from 20 to 25 registrants, fantastic. I'm not sure what size wait list might be beyond this, but we talk about, and you mentioned it, building capacity, but in reality, how many staff members, how many teachers at the TDSB would be eligible for this particular course and would benefit from it? Are we talking 50 or 500 sort of thing? So I'd really like to have a better idea. We're hitting 20 to 25 people right now, but realistically, are we really building capacity? Are we just taking small notches, or are we making big strides? And the next one was on the transition website. Is there a mechanism there to give feedback like we have in the special education plan, so users of that website can give feedback? And have we reached out to the shareholders, such as the community, the employers you're talking about, getting jobs for students when they leave? Because I don't think it's just for students, families, and educators, but it should also be for the community, employers, etc. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Nandy, I've got one quick question, then we're going to move to do something I completely forgot, and that's approve the minutes from our last meeting. Nandy, a couple of months ago, we passed a motion in one of the three priority areas SEAC identified, namely the idea of an expedited or revised process for parents to advocate or try to get resolution if they feel that their child's special education needs aren't being met. I'm just wondering, and I'm going to be addressing this on Wednesday at the Priorities in School Services Committee meeting. I'm just wondering, has staff made any changes or proposed any changes as a result of that motion? Just because I want to make my comments relevant to what you're actually doing, and also because I'm sure committee members here would like to know.
Thanks, David. So we haven't acted on that motion specifically, but within that motion are many pieces that the K-12 standards work group has been working on, our staff have been working on based on recommendations from the K-12 standards work group. So we've been continuing with that work. It does take time, as I said earlier. Our focus is to be in schools supporting students and staff. And so we really do try to use our other time to work on those recommendations. And we've made many, many changes and created many new resources that we've put on our website and parent sessions that we've been offering as well, whether they're more formal sessions or drop-in sessions to support families in navigating special education programs and services. So in that regard, we have absolutely been continuing to do the work that we started stemming from the previous motion in September. So that was the September motion. Then we had the October motion, which is what you're referring to right now, going to board, going to PSSE tomorrow.
Yep. All right. Wednesday, I think. I hope it's Wednesday. Okay, great.
Sorry, Wednesday. I'm mixing up my days.
I don't want to be all dressed up and in the wrong place. Could we have a motion to approve the December minutes? Nora, seconder. Leo, any proposed changes, or can we just vote on it? Anybody? Nothing? All in favor of approving the minutes? Carried. All right. Trustees reports. Any trustees want to report anything?
Hi, David. It's Michelle.
Hey, Michelle.
Just
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Thanks everybody for the discussion and feedback tonight. It's very helpful, and staff for the presentations and information. I have one thing to highlight to the committee. The policy on abuse and neglect of students. So this is the policy that involves like referrals to the Children's Aid Society. So duty to report different conditions. So that's been under review since 2022. Initial consultations produced significant changes to the draft. So there's new definitions, some new content. The draft is going to go to board. So it came to the Governance and Policy Committee last week, and it's going to go to board on the 22nd. And staff are looking for another consultation period because the changes to the policy were significant. They want the draft policy to go back out for public consultation. So as soon as that gets posted for consultation, I'm going to send it to Leanne to distribute to the committee, and I would encourage members to go on and take a look and send feedback. The staff, so Shameen Sandhu's office, they really want feedback as much as possible on the draft policy. I made some initial comments. So it's been realigned with different parts of legislation and human rights code, including the AODA. So I made some comments on adding in further definitions for ableism, to defining bias for students and families with disability, that staff welcomed and are going to take into account. But I think that this is an important policy for our SEAC partners to comment on and give feedback on. So I will let you know when that gets posted. It's coming shortly.
Great, thanks. Any other trustees want to make a trustees report? If not, any association reports? All right, before we go, just two quick announcements. One is TDSB has a new director of education. His name is Clayton Latouche. He was the assistant deputy minister, an assistant deputy minister whose mandate included special education at the Ministry of Education. Not met him physically in the same room, but we've had a number of Zoom meetings. I've written him to congratulate him and say we're looking forward to working with him, and he wrote back to reciprocate. And you'll recall that when the previous director of education wasn't able to attend our September meeting, Louise Risco very kindly undertook that she would get the new director when hired to us to meet. I would like to invite him for our February meeting. So that will be on the agenda. The town hall will be on the agenda, and no doubt other things will be too. And finally, this is just fun. This morning, I had the opportunity to speak to all the kids at the Allenby Public School. The principal invited me to give a talk on blindness and living with a disability, and I gave them all homework that I'm sure is going to be really well received, because I encouraged them to go out to the community, look for barriers, and think about how we could fix them. And I think it was kind of fun. The kids liked it. At least they said they did. It was like kind of a fun opportunity. So just a bit on the front lines of one of our schools. Motion to adjourn. I move we adjourn. I second the motion. Anybody opposed? I don't see any hands. We're adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.